Welcome everybody to this collaboration this afternoon. It's the Northwest, Southwest of England and the South Wales region webinar. My name's Andrea Wheel. I'm Northwest Regional Organiser, along with Phil Roberts, who can't be here today. We should have a really good session today, all about noise and hearing protection and best practice. So we've got speakers to talk about their real life experiences. We've got speaker to talk about manufacturing view, and we've also got Chris Steele from HSE who will give his regulatory view. So if I can pass over now to Katie and Sam, and they'll give you a brief outline of who they are, and then they will start with their presentation.
Hello
Excellent.
there, good afternoon.
Thanks,
Sam
Andrea.
and I are going to talk over each other today. You go, Sam.
Oh, so yeah, I was just saying, yeah, hi everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. For those of you who haven't heard us before, Kate and I have recently taken over the sort of the Southwest and South Wales region. Hence why we're maybe not the slickest webinar presenters yet, but I'm sure that will come with time. We just thought we'd start off by, just introducing ourselves, bit about sort of what we do on the slide here, and how we view our region sort of growing. So obviously, as ever, if anyone has any burning desires to be a regional organizer and they live in our area or any area, obviously get in touch with the BOHS and we'll happily get you involved with these meetings. And likewise, if you have any ideas of topics or industries you'd like to talk about, again, feel free to sort of shout up.
Yes, I'll add to that. The southwest of England and South Wales region is ginormous. And if we're going to have any face-to-face meetings, it would mean that at least somebody or other would have to drive at least 2.5 hours to get to the meeting. So Sam and I have kind of decided that whatever we produce or whatever we put on will almost certainly be in this format so that everybody can join. So I'm Katie Welsh. If you don't know me, why not? My company is OCNET Limited, and we've been going for 25 years. We're occupational hygienists, chartered members, and Sam and I are just going to bounce off each other when he's introduced himself about the kind of things that we come across in consultancy. And I'm sure this will ring true with you guys as well. So I'll hand over to you, Sam.
Excellent. Yeah. To introduce myself, I'm Sam Dix. I'm a team leader for Socotec UK, working in the south of England, also as an hygienist.
So, Sam, what kind of things have we seen out there as consultants? We tend to see all sorts of car crashes of what goes on, don't we? So we put together just a few, or Sam put together just a few questions that we can bounce off one another. What sort of things can influence and the effectiveness of hearing protection program then, Sam? What have you found?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think as everyone on this call can attest, it varies massively, and everyone has the best intentions, I think, when they're trying to put together a hearing protection program, but in the actual real world, it maybe isn't always as effective as people hope it is. The sort of things that influence the effectiveness are things like, the type of hearing protection they're using. Maybe they're not selecting it appropriately, or they're not consulting the actual people who've got to wear it. It's decided in a sort of an office far away. The levels of noise exposure. So what, are we talking 85? Are we talking 105? People don't consider the consistency of the use, how well the people are using it, what they're actually doing, and they don't think about any training or buy-in from those that have to wear it. They just sort of go, here's some earplugs.
Yeah, I agree with you there. We see a lot of blanketing the hearing protection. My absolute favorite is ear protection. No, hearing protection. And yeah, we see a lot of sort of, here's a bucket full of squidgy foam earplugs. We expect you to wear them, but a lot of the time, and I'm sure you do find the same thing, we don't see a lot of why we're telling you to wear this hearing protection. Why, that if you speak to the operator, he says, because my gaffer says I've got to wear it, or because there's a sign that says I have to wear it. But I do see a lot. That's not to say that I don't see good companies that have actually taken that information down to their employees, and as you say, get the buy-in. And from my point of view, those are the companies that are spending less on hearing protection because they're not being wasted.
Yes,
people know when to wear them and how to wear them because they've been given the instruction, but also they've been given, nobody likes to be told what to do. But if you explain why it is that perhaps we should be doing this, then obviously that goes a long way to helping people comply, I believe.
And you get, I suppose, less, we've all had the excuses, haven't we, of why people don't wear hearing protection. You see it available, you see the signs, but then you walk around the site and nobody's actually using it. I think we've all come up heard some corkers of excuses, haven't we, of sort of why they're not wearing it. People saying it's uncomfortable.
My particular favorite is I'm deaf anyway.
Yeah, I've heard that one many a time. Yeah, or just the classic what, and then I fall for it every time.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, and that sort of lack of awareness and difficulties communicating, I think, is a key sort of block for people actually using and following hearing protection programs.
Yeah.
Within most workplaces. I mean, of course, we are skipping maybe a bit ahead here. I feel like at this point we should probably make sure that everyone's aware. No doubt this will be mentioned again later on, that obviously hearing protection is at the bottom of the hierarchy, and it's important that employers continue to look for ways to sort of control noise at source wherever possible. With hearing protection only used in certain scenarios, such as when it's not able to be better controlled, or as a short-term sort of control measure.
Yeah, I'm seeing that a lot actually, and during the couple of decades we've been doing this, I have seen a shift, which is real positive actually. I've seen a shift in employers not just reaching for the bag of earplugs, but actually having a good think about where the noise is coming from. And trying to eliminate that noise at source. That itself, I think, brings another problem, because you've got away from the really loud noises, because they've taken their quick wins and they've put boxes around things, and they've acoustically shielded people from the worst noises. But then you get to that rumble of noise where the operators are thinking, well, I think I could hear the radio if the radio's on, or they've each got an individual radio, and we're still at the level where we actually need to provide hearing protection. Or at least it would be advisable to provide hearing protection here. It's, we're with 78, 79, it's there or thereabouts, but then we get a problem with people perhaps wanting to have a little bit of entertainment, a little bit of sidetrack or something or other, and they're then not wearing their hearing protection because the company has provided a works radio, or they do allow a radio. Is that the kind of thing that you've been seeing over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all come across a radio war, haven't we? Where one corner of the factory are enjoying Radio 2, it's Heart FM elsewhere, and then there's always a renegade in the corner who's just throwing out some crazy shapes. And I think that's something we'll definitely come across later on, potentially with our sort of supplier talk, some opportunities and other options potentially to mitigate that.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a question at you actually that you didn't give to me. So sorry about this. I'm not chucking you under the bus. But it's just occurred to me that noise-induced hearing loss is an injury. And those injuries that a bit like mental health problems, an injury that we can't necessarily see.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that people ignore that or don't understand other people's problems? This is obviously noise-induced hearing loss, for the most part, is something that is going to creep up on somebody during their working lifetime. And obviously your hearing gets worse as you get older, but that noise-induced hearing loss on the top of that, do you think that people are actually aware? Do you think it's one of those moments where everybody in the bubble is going, it's not going to happen to me?
I think the awareness piece is massive. Like you say, a lot of the hazards people encounter in workplaces are sudden, and I think they're very, you can imagine them, you can imagine something happening. Whereas, like you say, hearing loss, we're talking years down the line potentially, and it can be a bit of a bravado, can't they?
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, I'm already deaf anyway." It's sort of seen as a badge of honor of working in heavy industry and stuff like that, and it drives down, I think, use of maybe hearing protection because people don't immediately see that risk without that awareness training and, like you say, why people need to use it and all that kind of stuff. So no, yeah, it's the same with a lot of things, isn't it? Hand-on vibration, inhalation of airborne materials, these long-term sort of
like you
health
say,
risks.
if you can't put a sticking plaster over it or a cast on it, it's not real, right? and that I think that's a real sticking point with employers as well. It's a real difficult one for the employers to get over. It would be easy for us to sit as consultants and bash the employers over the head and go, you're not doing what you should do, and etc. But a lot of them are. But that's a real thorny issue, I think, to get across to somebody, to say, yeah, I know it's not happening to you now, or you think it's not, but what about in 10 years' time? And, Joe Bloggs is sitting there going, I'm not going to be working with you in 10 years' time or whatever. So I think that's a real, we need a driver to get that buy-in. Like you said, we need a driver to help the employer engage the employee. If the noise can't be eliminated in the workplace, let's give them the tools to be able to sell it to the workforce.
And I suppose there's an element for like training providers, apprenticeships, professional development courses. There's an element there as well, isn't there? Things that they need to also kind of consider as topics to include in their courses to get the buy-in, get the awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm presuming you've probably seen some great, we've talked about how good hearing protection is and how an effective program is good at, providing that sort of layer of control for operatives, but I'm sure we've all seen varying levels of sort of use and uptake, should we say, What are some examples of sort of poor practices that you've seen sort of in the workplace?
Oh my goodness me. The same as you, the dangling earplugs, there you go. The dangling earplugs, the glasses underneath the cans, the cans that have been stretched and put on backwards, put on upside down even sometimes. We see all sorts of things, as I'm sure you do, as I'm sure the audience does as well, to be perfectly honest. It's quite comical actually, isn't it? Sometimes that you can sort of look, you look around a workplace and you know that people need to wear hearing protection. There's a bit of being sensible as well, because I know that you and I talked about this off camera, is that a workplace may well be and may well need to be a blanket hearing protection during operation. But then you and I have walked into a completely and utterly silent workplace because they're on a clean down day, or because there is no work on that line that day, and we're told to put our hearing protection in because them's the rules, kid.
Yeah, and it becomes performative in that sense, doesn't it? And as in the top right picture, they sort of just get sort of vaguely placed in the vicinity of the ear, and you're sort of sat there going, well, what's the point? But well, what is the point in this? We're just using earplugs here for the sake of earplugs, and there's no thought going on sort of behind that. One I came across a while back was a place where a chap actually had hearing aids, and they were they considered the role he was doing, and I think they come to the conclusion that he worked there for a reason. Obviously, we suggested maybe moving to somewhere else, but they were inquiring about hearing protection for that individual. Obviously, conventional hearing protection maybe not appropriate for that instance. And again, the classic one size fits all.
Oh yeah.
As we said, here's some earplugs. If you don't like earplugs, tough luck. If your ear canal is not suited to these earplugs, tough luck. These
and
things.
They're always 36s, aren't they? They're always 36s.
Always the way. Everyone loves the highest. Highest SNR must be the good SNR.
The harder they are, the better.
Absolutely. And again, places where maybe they don't have strict requirements. I've seen things with like woolly hats. People have their hearing protections over their hats. Again, you said like glasses, beards, earrings, all this kind of stuff can prevent proper use of the available hearing protection, which just reduces the impact, and I think also then lessens people's confidence in it. I think they think they're protected, but then they're not actually, or they see through it, don't they?
I think there is a bit of that, and I think there's a bit of hoodwinking going on. I think that there's some genuine, I thought I was wearing them correctly. And I think there's a little bit of well, what's the point in me wearing them when they're not suitable? I know that they're not suitable, but I can't get anything else. And so and it isolates me. I can't hear my mate talking to me. I can't, when do you think that becomes a safety issue, for instance?
Very true. Places now, the pedestrian vehicle interface, forklift whizzing around, other vehicles. If you can't hear those horns, you can't hear warning alarms, you can't hear anything. Yeah, so going to be a big issue, isn't it, eventually? And you do hear the accidents, and that's a contributing factor, is hearing protection, overprotection, and things like that. Yeah, it again, lack of maybe thought about what type of hearing protection we're using. Is it appropriate? Do they need to wear it if it's blanket? Do they need to wear it in that sort of
Yeah, I've
run.
got instances where I've got people going from a very quiet area to a noisy area on a forklift, and they're going backwards and forwards. The noisy area isn't super noisy, but it requires them to wear hearing protection. But then they're coming back into an almost silent warehouse. And, you know, the tendency is to either leave them in or don't put them in.
Yeah.
And, you know, both are wrong. So it's real difficult. It's real difficult for everybody, actually. It's really difficult for everybody.
Sometimes if they do try and they take them in and out and they end up just getting these earplugs grubbier and grubbier as the day goes on, and then we're onto a different sort of hazard then, aren't we?
Of course, yes.
Never
We're
ending.
into some real horrible nasties.
Well,
go on.
I was just saying, in some places as well, we see sort of non-rated hearing protection. I don't know if you've come across that, maybe in smaller enterprises, self-employed endeavors, or people doing, you know, DIY and things like that at home, where again they think they're doing, and they're close, but maybe just not quite not quite there. Is that something you've come across?
Yeah, for sure. Well-meaning, you know, people who were wholeheartedly believing that they were giving their employees the right protection, and doing the right thing, and not actually achieving it. So yeah, we've seen those for sure. And you know, I think this is going to come on. I think you're building to our last slide, aren't you? There, eloquently. that this does come on to where we're going to talk about the AirPod Bluetooth speaker issue.
Other brands are available at this point.
This is not the BBC. It's okay.
Okay, it's fine. Yeah, no, I'm seeing this in increasingly frequently. You know, where maybe they've all argued about radios, and then they've just decided, you know what, I'm just gonna put in my earphones and listen to, you know, to whatever I want to listen to, and you can see the logic behind it. But I've always wondered then if, you know, some of these devices can go very loud. Obviously they're at work. Is that then you know, does the employer have an obligation to sort of monitor the volume they're playing them at? Do we have to restrict them? Do we have to say, oh, you can only go up to volume 5 out of 10 on your phone? A really sort of tricky thing to sort of.
It's an absolute minefield, I think. It's an absolute minefield, because I'm sure the audience would agree with us that there are instances in the workplace where we've got somebody doing either a repetitive task or a task that is really quite boring, and they find that they can concentrate a little bit better if they're listening to a little bit of their own music or a podcast or something or other. It does raise the question, is it a distraction? But then I would also throw into that argument, is it more or less of a distraction than somebody talking to you who's standing next to you?
Yeah, very true.
You know, we all know about the use of mobile phones when you're driving, but is that more distracting or less distracting than your passenger rattling on about something or other, or the radio rattling on about something or other? I don't know. I don't know, and I don't think we can answer those questions. I think that if an employer is going to allow the use of individual entertainment, then that has to be drawn up suitably and sufficiently in a risk assessment. I think we need to look at things very carefully. And then, like you say, the minefield of, are we then condoning somebody actually damaging their hearing whilst they're at work?
Yeah, I was in a doing a visit a couple of months ago, and it was in an office actually, and I was sat there doing, you know, having a chat with the person I was there to deal with, and I could hear something, you know, like a radio almost, and it was the person next to us had their earphones in, and they were blasting away their tunes as they were tapping away some spreadsheets. But it made you think, you know, those sort of areas you don't commonly think of. An office environment, I wouldn't normally think of that as a high noise risk area, but obviously this person, they were potentially being exposed to a high level for potentially quite a prolonged period of time. I don't know sort of how long they obviously were listening to it for, but yeah, it's something that, you know, I think could change how the dynamic of how we have to do a workplace noise survey, sort of things we have to consider, and also maybe, you know, the observations we're making in that sense. You know, it's key, isn't it, to be able to have a look at what people are doing, have a look at, you know, are they using hearing protection? Is it actually hearing protection? Because some of it does look similar-ish, you know, and where's it coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. And where's it coming from, and what are we doing about it? Because it is very difficult for an employer to please everybody, and still, you know, there is no doubt, certainly not in my mind anyway, that there's no doubt that your productivity goes up if you are enjoying what you're doing, or you are able to enjoy something else whilst you're doing what you're doing. And that's why we have historically had works radios, or you know, way back when, somebody reading a newspaper or something, or just a little bit of something or other into the workplace. But I think the thorny issue of your own ear entertainment is something that I think that we could really do with a bit of help on, and maybe some solutions.
Quite possibly, and that's a very nice segue, I think, into our sort of our next speaker on today's call, who hopefully will be able to provide a little bit of input from a manufacturer's point of view, someone who is trying to solve these answers and provide, you know, hearing protection for a range of quite exciting industries, or at least they seem exciting to me anyway.
Absolutely. I'll give a little bit of reference as well. Ultimate Ear are a company that I came across through my daughter, actually, and actually my daughter's boyfriend, who is a Dakar finisher. He did the Dakar Rally, if anybody knows what that is, on a motorcycle. And I know that Ultimate Ear gave him some hearing protection whilst he was doing that rally. And I was at the time looking for a solution for one of my clients, and came across some real interesting stuff that Ultimate Ear have put onto the market. And that's kind of how Sam and I came about to talk about this, to come together with the Northwest Group, and to actually bring this webinar together for you. So hopefully Dave can give us a little bit of insight as to what he can bring to the table as possibly a solution to our problems here. So if you're okay, Sam, I think we'll hand over to Dave.
Will do.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yep.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Yeah, thanks very much for the invite. Dave Marshall from Ultimate. We've been in the hearing protection industry for 23 years. All of our products are custom molded, so there's a little bit of a twist on potentially what you've been speaking about so far. Very interesting to hear pretty much every scenario we've been through on site, talking to people and listening to excuses of why people don't use hearing protection, and you know the classics. And yeah, it gets a little bit frustrating because it's not a little bit of a serious topic. It's very serious. It's life changing in some cases. You know, you can really be affected by it. So yeah, from our perspective, we've been manufacturing hearing protection with communication embedded inside. We've been doing this quite successfully for as long as we've been going. It's become a very popular product. As you say, the issue of trying to get on with your job or communicate or listen to comms at a reasonable level is quite a challenging sort of topic. Really, no matter what environment you're in, whether it's, you know, a motorcycle listening to comms or whether it's the police on motorcycles listening to comms, it's all sorts of challenges that we've seen throughout the years. What we bring to the table is a delivery mechanism that's, I suppose, comfortable to the user. It's acceptable by the provider, the client, or the company, and it is really about a compromise on all levels. The products, you know, first and foremost, fit properly because they're custom made, they're custom designed for that individual. So you've eliminated the, you know, as you've said earlier, the classics of, you know, not in properly, token gestures of hearing protectors. You know, I've seen them under hair nets in industries where it wasn't even in the ear. They could just see the yellow plug through a blue hairnet, and everybody's walking around. I'm just like, it's crazy, you know. It's a real big challenge, and it is a challenge irrespective. We've been banging our drum all this time, and as you say, I think there is a shift at the moment. People are maybe moving I liked your analogy of the priority of hearing protection up the ladder, because it's becoming more of an issue, I think, and waste and all the other elements that you can talk about with hearing protectors. But no, from our point of view, product wise, hearing protection and communication, whatever it may be, whether it's a radio or comms via a phone, is at the forefront of what we do. It's probably one of the biggest selling products at the moment that we are involved in, and that can be from, you know, construction sites where you've got banksmen, you know, directing very important traffic, or crane workers communicating with down below. The days of hand signals and shouting they're just gone. It's unnecessary. It doesn't need to be that way, and there are solutions, and as I say, we've been delivering that solution out to industry for quite a while. We do have.
Dave, can I just ask a quick question and say that the products that you're talking about, are these SNR rated? Absolutely, yeah. So everything we sell as CE approved and SNR rated. Again, it's sometimes you feel like you are banging your head with some people, because, as you said, all they consider is the highest level, the highest value. That's adequate. We'll give everybody, you know, the plug. Now all of the products are CE certified, so you've got absolute fit. You've got an accountability by the user. They want to use it because it is comfortable. It's the right level of protection for that area, because we've gone through that with the client and people and understanding. And then there's an element to re-deliver after you've dealt with the source of
sound trying to enter into the ear, re-deliver low volume comms into the ear canal. And it's
so basically what you're saying is there is an answer to the AirPod, but it's a controlled answer.
absolutely.
And it's an SNR rated, and we
Yep.
can allow our workforce to be protected, but also maybe connected as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, it's like everything else. There's always a resistance, and it seems to be I don't know. It's like an unaccounted resistance, usually based on people thinking that something is expensive, when in actual fact it's not. It's cost effective, and it'll be very welcomed by their workforce. Look, sometimes you've got situations where they're in such extreme environments that you've never in the life of Sundays have them using earplugs with music on of any sort, ours or whatever. So they're going to use a protector. They're going to use a simple passive plug provided by us or whoever to do that job. But where there is a need, and if you've got a situation where people are, I don't know, resisting hearing protection, we have a solution. And it's well, you'd expect me to say it is a good one. It's various varieties. You've got options for connectivity via Bluetooth or hardwired, so more radio sort of orientated options where you can again deliver directly from the radio, crystal clear, but most importantly, low volume comms into the ear. And that's the key point.
Yeah. I think that's a game changer, actually. I'll drag you into this as well, Sam. For me, this was quite a revelation. I don't know why it was a revelation, but it was quite a revelation that actually this kind of stuff existed. And that this could be another tool that could be used by employers and by employees to enable protection, but also enable a happy and healthy workplace.
Absolutely. You've outlined a few industries there. Are there any where you're seeing big uptake in your products, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, the HS2 are currently using a lot of our products on their sites. We've delivered to multiple construction sites throughout London and still continue to. COVID, to be quite honest, was a bit of a game changer in as much as people wanted to communicate at distance. So the element of protection and then shouting was questioned. It wasn't acceptable and people couldn't get close. So again, that was, another element. But wherever you can think of noise, from manufacturing, food to Formula One, there's a need for what we do, and we provide it into, well, quite a cross section of markets. We're in some weird and wonderful places, as you guys are with what you do.
Wherever people are working at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Wherever there's noise.
Yeah. That's absolutely excellent, Dave. Thank you so much for coming and sharing what is available there.
No problem.
And I'm sure that there'll be quite a few questions for you at the end.
No problem.
I think Sam and I are going to hand back to Andrea.
Well, we've got time for one question, Dave, if that's okay.
Yep.
One question was, are there any specific difficulties using communication-enabled HP where the noise source has specific low or high frequency noise?
In terms of protection.
I'm presuming so, yes.
Yeah. We have a variety of different filters and attenuators which are inserted into the products. So again, it's the upfront working with the client to understand their noise levels, and then for us to provide the correct product for that environment. And quite honestly, if we don't have the product, we'd sooner, there's some products, as you stated, that people may need a ridiculously high SNR level or high level of protection, and we don't have it. So we're never going to say that's adequate, because we're absolutely exposed and vulnerable to all sorts of accusations. So dependent on the levels and the circumstances, I'd be sort of confident we could help.
Okay. There's no more questions at the moment for you, Dave. But if people have questions as Chris speaks, there is one for you, Chris, but I don't know whether you'll be able to talk about this as you go along. It was to do with guidance for AirPod Bluetooth headphones, so you might want to address that or do it at the end.
Do you want to do that now, or do you want to do it at the end? Or?
Yeah. But over to Chris now. If you give yourself a big up, Chris, and then you can get on with your presentation.
Hang on. Now, can you see that and can you hear me? Is that okay? Stuff. Hello, I'm Chris Steele. I'm one of the noise and vibration inspectors for HSE. I'm afraid this is the old-fashioned portion of the event where I will just be going through some slides. So I apologise for that. I shouldn't start off with an apology, should you? Anyway, I'm going to start off by showing you this, because this was something that I found quite surprising. What you're looking at is a table from a consultant's report. It was part of an investigation that I was doing on workplace noise. Now, I don't have any particular issue with the hearing protection specifications, or rather the models of hearing protection that they're using. The thing that I've got an issue with is that all the numbers that you see there that are in red is the predicted noise level at the wearer's ear once these protection has been put in place. And this is an issue because it's overprotecting. Now, the person who made this spreadsheet is probably not the person who wrote the report, because the spreadsheet that this was on, when you overprotect, the cells turn red. And in every instance, at every location, this is suggesting that there's overprotection. So I suppose the question you've probably got at this stage is, well, why are you telling me that, Chris? What's that really got to do with the wearing of hearing protection? Well, it's because if you implement hearing protection as your means of control, you introduce an expectation of administration that needs to be done as well. And I think somebody mentioned earlier that hearing protection is at the bottom of the hierarchy of control. Well, the way I think about it, I don't think of it as a hierarchy. The way I think about it is I've climbed up to the top of a diving board and I'm going to jump off, and I've decided that the only thing that I'm going to bother with is PPE. So I'm making it particularly difficult for myself to actually hit something that's full of water. In addition to that, if I manage to hit the PPE and get the hearing protection right, get the right specification and the right type of product, I then have an administrative burden that I have to comply with pretty much on a daily basis to make sure that that target that I hit earlier is consistently maintained. So I thought what I'd do is talk to you about two things. One is the electronic hearing protection, because that's the sort of area that we're touching on. And I'll cover some of the other things beyond what we've already spoken about. But I'll also talk about what HSE's expectations are for any hearing protection, because it's a message that we consistently try to get out. It's something that we tell our inspectors, and it's something that we want to tell you. So let's start off with the electronic stuff. It falls into a number of categories. There's really three of them, the way that we think of them at HSE. The first one is the level dependent stuff. Now, obviously concerned that I don't want to be showing one product over another, so I've managed to select some images that I'm sure any manufacturer would be, not massively happy to see, but they're probably aware about these things happening. Anyway, level dependent hearing protection, they just look like normal earmuffs or earplugs, but in this case they've got some sort of microphone in them that picks up the sound and hears through. That's what that little black circle is at the top. So it's protectors that usually use an electronic sound system to relay outside sound to the ear. So they bypass the protector when the outside noise level is low. The most suited to situations where the noise exposure is intermittent, and I think that's something that was touched on earlier. What do you do when it's really quiet? What do you do when it then becomes noisy? So they're useful for that position. They can be good for speech intelligibility, so they may also improve level-dependent hearing protectors. And manufacturer of these protectors must ensure that the electronically amplified sound remains at a safe level that is fully attenuated, is provided to the highest levels of sound. So it's the expectation that the manufacturer makes sure that you're not being exposed to noise through that hear-through function that could cause harm. So HSE would not question their use when they're provided in for situational awarenesses while still controlling noise exposures to any safe level. We're currently in the process of doing quite a bit of research on electronic hearing protection, and generally our findings are that we're kind of favourable towards it, but we're still working on the practicalities of it and how we feel about it. But a lot of what you're seeing here is comment that's already in L108. Second type of electronic hearing protection that we come across is the sort of audio entertainment hearing protection. So that would be, not in this case, someone who has ripped the speakers out of their Vauxhall Corsa and shoved them into a set of earmuffs, but things that are actually designed to let you listen to music in a workplace. So entertainment audio muffs and also plugs, they must be limited to a level of the relay signal of 82 dB at the ear. And that's to make sure that the music that's coming through them or the podcast that's coming through them doesn't in itself create a harm. And that again is up to the manufacturer to be able to demonstrate that and show that they're compliant with that. We also check that the wearers can clearly hear essential warning signals, so speech, whether that's somebody shouting at them to not put their hands on a machine, or for that matter, any kind of fire alarm, and that has to be above the sound reproduced at the ear. Now, there is a method in ISO 7731 for checking that. It's quite a complicated one that involves you doing noise measurements and all sorts of stuff, but there's a much more simplified one, which is basically a, check and see if they can hear type test. And that would be the one that we would tend to expect people to follow if they were concerned about people not being able to hear warning signals. Third one is the sort of audio communication hearing protection type stuff. So this would be the sort of thing where we've got, a microphone that you're speaking into and you're trying to communicate with each other. For that, speech intelligibility may also be improved. That's what our expectations are, but the hearing protection has got some sort of communication facility. So for the hearing protectors designed to provide essential safety-related communication against speech and warning signals, the audio input is not limited, as the information to be received might be crucial for safety. So we're not talking about music coming through, we're talking about people being given information and instruction, like the banksman indicating where a vehicle should be going to avoid them striking anybody, that you can get away with that being higher than that sort of 82 level. But we expect care to be taken when setting the maximum input voltage. So again, this is an expectation for the manufacturer, and we expect them to be able to show that they've thought about that. Where the audio hearing protection features microphones or two-way communication, they should be switched off when not in use to avoid reproducing workplace noise at the ear. And that is something we've come across quite a lot, that actually one of the biggest things that's exposure to noise for some workers is the noise that's coming through their two-way headset. And the risk of the system's failure needs to be considered when using audio hearing protection to relay safe related communications. So we've got a fail to safe type expectation here. And if this thing breaks down or it's not working properly, what have you got as a backup? Okay, so that's the sort of electronic stuff that we look at. Generally, we're quite favourable about it. We think that you can use it to help you achieve other safety issues, but we expect you to be aware of what the problems are with it or the potential issues with it and make sure that you're trying to deal with them before you put them into place. The HSE has expectations for any hearing protection, and I'm sure some of you have seen me talking about this before, and I'll be honest with you, I make no apologies for doing this again, because it's something that we, as I say, we say to our inspectors and we say to you, this is what we expect you to do. And when you're out on site, if you're looking at hearing protection being used and you want to have an idea of whether it's working, we expect you to use the acronym CUFF, or, because if you get it wrong, you get a cuff around the ear. Well, what is CUFF? Well, CUF is going and looking at hearing protection and checking its condition. Is it in good condition? Is it being used? Is it F, fit the ear? And F, is it fit for purpose? So condition is it fallen to bits? Everything you see there has been confiscated from a work site where people were actively using this as hearing protection. So we'll have a look at it. Are the seals burst? Has the foam been pinched from inside it? You know, has someone put a loudspeaker inside an earmuff that they probably shouldn't have? We want to make sure people are using it all the time. If you see three people having a conversation, two of them are wearing earplugs or earmuffs and one of them isn't, that means that one of them's wrong or two of them are wrong. And then, is it fitting the ear? Anything that interferes with a muff or a plug that stops it from working is going to be a problem or has the potential to be a problem. So you should be checking for that type of stuff. And then the last one is fit for purpose. So again, this is in our guidance document. We've got these rough estimations of noise exposure and rough estimations of what the SNR should be to match with those. And we expect it to be some kind of assessment of this is how loud it is, and this is the hearing protection that we are going to supply. So condition, is it burst? And then if we add in the issues with the electronic stuff, then we've probably got other things we want to check about the condition. Is the microphone working? Is it charged? Do the loudspeakers within it work? Use, is it being used all the time? We are abundantly aware that if you remove your hearing protection for even short periods of time, it will reduce its effectiveness. But similarly, if you want to make sure that electronic hearing protection is being used, then you'll need to make sure that it's charged. You'll need to make sure you're supplying people with additional batteries if that's what they take. And you also want to make sure that they understand how to switch it on and off. Fit, does it fit the ear? Well, there's not too many issues when it comes to electronic stuff, but you know, earplugs, I've seen that before. If they're not in right, that's a problem. And then fit for purpose. Again, you know, we expect there to be an understanding of what am I exposed to in terms of noise, and how does the hearing protection make sure that I'm controlling the exposure whilst not overprotecting. Now, that calculator, that's on our website. We actively tell people to go and use that as and when they can. If you're struggling with that, my experience is that most of the hearing manufacturers, hearing protection manufacturers, can check that sort of thing for you and give you information and advice on that. But again, when we're talking about, is it fit for purpose? When we talk about electronic stuff, we've also got this question about, well, can you hear those audible alarms, whether it's electronic alarms or people shouting? And also, are we making sure that any kind of hear through that's coming to us, particularly from entertainment sound, is controlled to a level that we would want it to be controlled to? So I've kind of laboured the point here about the fact that PPE has got this administrative element of it, and I suppose the question is, well, why am I labouring that point? Well, it's because even if you do all these things, even if you're managing to control people's exposure, HSE will still expect you to have done the elimination, the substitution and the engineering controls. And whilst we accept that that's not always practicable in every instance and every situation, it's still something that we would expect you to have had a look at. And even if the things that you introduce, your elimination and substitutions and engineering controls, have made a difference, but hearing protection is still required, we would still expect it to be done because it gives the hearing protection a better chance of working. The last time we checked, we found that about 40% of the workforce were getting this wrong when we talk about people using hearing protection correctly. We looked at whether they were wearing it correctly, whether it was being managed correctly. And we went to organisations who knew we were coming. They knew we were going to ask about hearing protection. They knew what day we were going to turn up. And they knew that they were going to get a scientist from HSE asking these questions, and still we got a 40% rate of people getting it incorrect. So it's really important to us that if your reliance is on hearing protection, that you spend the time and the effort looking at it correctly. Now, I'm going to leave with that slide, and I'm happy to answer questions if anybody's got any, and I saw a few there that I'm keen to answer.
Do you want to answer the questions, Chris?
Yeah, I'll just shove them on. There was a couple there. Right. let me just go back. Somebody asked about low attenuation hearing protection. One of the slides I put up there said SNR of 20, and the question was, where can you get that? Well, they're right. It's not easy to get low attenuation hearing protection, and actually, it's actually difficult for even hearing manufacturers to get them rated as low attenuation hearing protection because of the way that the ratings process works. But they are available. It is possible to get low attenuation hearing protection. Sadly, I can't tell you who the manufacturers are, but they are out there. The other thing as well is with the hear-through stuff that's available, well, that potentially negates the sort of issue that you have there. So when you're in those lower noise environments, you'll get the hear-through with the electronic hearing protection, and if you go into higher noise environments, it goes up. So there's a benefit from that type of stuff. Somebody else asked about the use of AirPods and what HSE's position is on that. So there's a couple of things maybe to point out there. First of all, there's people who are wearing their own earplugs, their own earpods, their own hi-fi system within a normal work environment where it isn't noisy, and then there's people who are wearing them in a high noise environment. So let's start off with the stuff that I deal with most days, which is high noise environment and somebody deciding to put in their music and listen to that through their own earbuds. That type of thing we're really not keen on. In fact, to be honest with you, we would not expect to see that happening at all. If you want your employees to listen to music through some sort of headset, then you should be considering whether or not that's something you want to supply, but there's absolutely no obligation on you to do that. If you're listening to music in a quiet situation, then that's entirely up to you. And okay, we're then into the question of, well, what about the noise that you're producing from that? Who's responsible for it? Now, that's quite difficult because fundamentally, if you're trying to figure out whether this is a work task. So if your work task requires you to wear something that plays music in your ear, then that is the sort of thing where we would be concerned about whether or not you're controlling exposure to noise. So if you work in the music industry and you're wearing in-ear monitors, we would be concerned about how noisy that is. If you work in an office and you've made a decision to listen to your music at a very high volume, it would be questionable as to whether or not the employer is responsible. The bit where it gets really muddy is, and I'll give you a real life example, at a person who asked to be provided with noise cancelling headphones so that they could listen to music in a noise cancelled environment because they needed it as an adjustment for their workplace stress issue. So this person has said, I get stressed at work, it's not a particularly noisy environment, and I find that if I wear ear cancelling headphones whilst playing some music through it, that helps me concentrate. And that was supplied to them as a reasonable adjustment by the organisation, and they actually went out and bought them the headphones, which I thought, oh, that's nice. But now that they're being provided for a work task to help that person as a reasonable adjustment, it's probably incumbent upon that company to do some sort of assessment to make sure that that person isn't playing the music so loud that it could potentially cause hearing damage. There's always another question that comes up about listening to music at work, which is, it would be quiet in here if we could get the buggers to turn the radio off, but they want to run it at full blast. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm never very popular when I ask this question, unless, of course, you're Fergal Sharkey, in which case he loved when I asked this question, and that is, are you paying your PRS checks to the Performing Rights Society? Because if you're playing music in a workplace with 20 or 30 people in it, you owe money to the person that's making that music. And if you're not doing that, then you probably need to get that sorted out first. After that, my preference is that you turn it down so that it isn't causing a noise issue. And my next preference is, well, you can get hearing protection that you can play music and podcasts through at a safe level. So maybe you should be thinking about that. Right, sorry, there's other questions here, aren't there? I'm probably going to stop there, Andrea, and let you ask me some of the questions because you've been looking at them.
We've just been asked, how accurate is the attenuation?
For the hearing protection, I don't know, is that me that's supposed to answer that? Maybe Dave could answer that. There you go, throw you under the bus, Dave. No.
Take yourself off mute, Dave.
He's struggling. While he's
Me?
he's in.
He's back.
Yep. Sorry, can you say that again? What was the question again?
How accurate is the attenuation?
It's only as accurate as the testing, to be quite honest. And that varies, as we all know, or maybe we don't know. It's a test between candidates to arrive at the attenuation values, but that can vary. So it is accurate, but there are variables, and that's the differences in the. If you look at some of the attenuation, get a little bit into the figures of the specification of the hearing protector, but you've got the variables underneath which actually give you then the average attenuation. So depending on that variable, that's how accurate they are in honesty. But could talk about that one for quite a few hours, but yeah. So yeah, in a nutshell, pretty accurate.
So for us at HSE, we appreciate that there's a standardised test for hearing protection, and if the product complies with that test, then they can quote the number from that, and we will take that as read. But in our calculator, we apply a sort of real world adjustment of about 4 dB to assume that people might not be wearing it well enough. And actually, the biggest issue with hearing protection and its continued performance isn't the accuracy or the quality of the product when it starts off. It's how people then choose to wear it, whether that's incorrectly or correctly. Variability in the size of their ear canals if they're wearing earbuds, earplugs, and then also the fact that you might get some deterioration of performance over time, particularly for banded earmuffs as the bands get stretched. And also whether or not you as an employer have decided that you will be replacing the hygiene kit on a set of earmuffs at a reasonable interval, depending on how much it's been used. So there's a lot of variability in what can happen to the hearing protection once it's been supplied. And also, we then get into accuracies of, well, how accurate is the noise level? Because that may be going up and down as well, depending on what you're doing. So we're trying to get to a reasonably practical level of control, and we're also saying to people, look, hearing protection isn't the be all and end all. We do expect you to do more in terms of control if you can, and if you can't, you should be able to demonstrate why that's not practicable for you. Right, here's one here. Are there any specific difficulties using communication-enabled hearing protection where the noise source has specifically low or high frequency? You've been asked that already, haven't you? Are there any more, Andrea? You're on mute as well now. You're on mute, Andrea.
Sorry.
There you go.
A lot of them are comments. How about getting employees checked to ensure it's fitting them well and correctly protecting them? That was a comment about hearing protection.
That's kind of drifting towards fit testing, isn't it? So as things currently stand, there isn't a requirement for fit testing within the guidance or the regulations for hearing protection. There doesn't seem to be a significant appetite for that at the moment. That may change, but that's probably highly dependent on what industry says and what industry thinks. But it's not something that we're looking for. I mean, our HSEs and my experience with it is that when I've seen people using fit testing systems, there's a really good way of training people on whether or not they've put the thing in right. And I'll say that as myself, that I was shocked at how badly I was fitting earplugs. So yeah, there's definitely a benefit in that. I mean, the simplest thing that we tell our inspectors to do when they go to site, and what they typically do is they get issued with the hearing protection the site has. If it's earplugs, we will get them to put their hands over their ears once they're in, and if there's no significant difference between doing that and not doing that, they've probably put them into a reasonable level. But yeah, I mean, fit testing is something that I know some of the hearing protection manufacturers are very keen on. I'm not saying we're not convinced, it's just that we don't have an app. There's nothing in our guidance at the moment to say that we would expect it to be done.
There's another comment here about however good the education campaigns in the workplaces are, there'll always be those who don't want to play along, rebels without a cause. So, which is said for society in general. We all know speed limit is 70 on the motorway, and I'm sure everyone does 70. Smiley. That's why controlling things at source, which I think is what you were saying at the beginning, Chris, about your little man jumping into the puddles. It's always better to control that source, to take the human factor out of the situation, so we wouldn't have to have all these conversations and presentations about hearing protection and things like that. There's another question here about, sorry, go on.
Well, I mean, there's always an assumption that the reason why people aren't wearing the hearing protection is that they're playing funny buggers. But I mean, my experience is that sometimes when I go to site as an HSE inspector and I see people wearing hearing protection incorrectly, they're doing it as a sort of passive aggressive way of expressing the fact that no one's ever told them how to wear it. And so they want me to come over and say, why aren't you wearing it? So they can then sort of let loose on the fact that no one's ever given them any training. Sometimes people don't wear hearing protection because it's not suitable for them. So, you know I can get an earplug quite comfortably into that ear, but I can't get one in that ear because the canal size is too small. And so there's a question as to whether or not there's been, not necessarily fit testing, but have they been fitted for the hearing protection to make sure it's suitable for them? Sometimes you'll find that people aren't wearing it because they're finding it an uncomfortable thing to have on for extended periods of the day. So it's not always just the case that someone's saying, well, I'm just not going to bother. Now, there are instances where people say, I'm just not going to bother. And there is an expectation that if you're supplying stuff for people's health and safety, that they should be using that. And if they don't, then, there is an allowance, or there is allowances within the health and safety regulations that person's sort of breaching the health and safety regulations. And in those instances, well, what you can do is probably pretty limited. But if I turn up, I can have a sort of pretty stern conversation with somebody. I don't mind being told that I'm a git. It's quite common for that to happen. So, yeah.
There's another comment here about noise levels creeping higher due to compressed air leaks and wear on fans, and it becomes more critical when working at lower noise levels. So I think that's about noises that come from sources where things aren't being maintained, or
yeah, I mean, the compressed air thing's a particular bugbear of mine because, again, I'm conscious that I'm repeating myself a lot, but the thing with compressed air for me is just it's the soundtrack, the money being wasted. Is that if you hear a hissing noise, it means you're spending money on electricity, because that's obviously the cheapest thing in the world right now, and you're going to convert that electricity into compressed air, and then you're going to let it leak out all over the shop. So if you hear that, you could be doing yourself a favour by trying to control it, let alone the people that are exposed to it. And then when we talk about compressed air guns, again, there are things, again, I can't say who, but there are things that you can put on the end of air guns and nozzles which will make them more efficient, which will again save you money. So it's the sound of money being spent inappropriately is the sort of hiss from compressed air.
And there was a comment about welcoming HSE guidance on AirPod Bluetooth headphones. I think you were saying that the regulation guidance we've got at the moment should fit that. Is that correct?
Well, there's stuff in there, but it's all centred around hearing protection. We don't really have anything. It's a fair point. We don't really have don't really have very much in the way of, what should we expect if we see people wearing, amplified music, earbuds or headphones at work. But it kind of, for me, it falls into, is it being used specifically for a work task? Is it a headset in a call centre? There's issues with, there's ways or expectations around that. or is somebody using it just purely for their own entertainment? And in that instance, that starts to be questionable as to whether it's necessarily the employer's responsibility or the workers. But you know, you'll have very limited control over what someone's playing music at in their ear. However, most iPhones now, most telephones will have some sort of limit on them where they'll try to stop that. And there are companies out there who manufacture inline sort of limiters that you can plug in to them. So if you're expecting people to run them off the works PC, that type of thing, that can be done. But yeah, we don't have a lot of advice on it at the moment. So
is that something you might address in the future? Or?
Yeah, we might, because there's a lot of it going on. And I mean, for example, I know that we read a paper recently in the United States where there's an argument being made that the action values for workplace noise in the US should be reduced because people are exposed to higher levels of daily noise now than they were 40 or 50 years ago because of the amount of environmental noise and the amount of noise that they get from earpods. So now that their overall noise exposure is higher, when they're exposed to working noise, that should be lower. Now, that's not something HSE's considering, but I think there's probably an argument to be made that there needs to be some sort of comment put out on it. But again, we have to be careful that we don't sort of stray into areas that aren't work related, because we are health and safety regulator for work. We're not health and safety regulator for everybody's sort of personal activities.
Yeah. Okay, are there any more questions, anybody? I don't think we've had any in the chat. Speakers, do you have any more questions for each other? Oh, we've got one question here. What is the safe level of noise which pregnant women can be exposed to, and does the presence of amniotic fluids effectively increase the noise levels the unborn child is exposed to versus the externally measured levels? Wow, that's a question.
All right. Well, there's two things there, isn't there? Does the process, does the fact that you're pregnant alter the sort of potential for you to get hearing loss? I'll be completely honest with you, I'm not sure. I know that if you're pregnant, it will change your cartilage, but whether that affects the cartilage in the ears, I couldn't tell you. If my colleague Rachel was here, she would be much more versed in that, so she might be able to help you. Another thing is, are we damaging the hearing of the baby that's inside you? And again, well, that's dependent on how far along you are, and also how noisy it is. But as things currently stand, we don't have much guidance on that. It's something that we definitely want to have a look at. But you know, I don't think we can get away from the fact that if you look at our statistics for hearing loss, there's a very, very small proportion of them are women. And I suppose the question you would be asking is that accurate? Because I know for a fact that there's a hell of a lot of women that work in the textile industry, and that is notoriously noisy. So you would question whether the fact that I think we're maybe 4 or 5 women in over a 10-year period have registered with hearing loss. You know, why is that? Why is it such a low number when we know that there's higher numbers of women in the food and textile industry where there can be high levels of noise? So that's probably one of the reasons why we don't know what the answer is, that 99% of the people that we're coming across aren't in that position. So we don't really have a sufficient amount of data or information to make a decision on it.
Right. Okay. I think we've answered all the questions. Oh. Okay. No, that's just something that's been added. Well, I just want to say, I think we can draw that to a close now. Everyone's thanking us. But thank you so much to the speakers, Sam and Katie, Dave and Chris. And I just want to say thank you to all the delegates for attending, giving us your patience and asking your questions. And I just want to remind you that the OH23 conference is being held in June this year in Leeds. Don't forget to check out the programme and book yourself on if you want to attend. It's a really good event. So I would just like to say thank you again to the speakers, and thank you all for attending. And if we can draw this session to a close, that would be great. Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Andrea.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.